Hey everybody, my name is Michael Myers. I'm going to go over um, the book, The Examination of Men's Wits. Sorry about that. So originally this text was written by Juan Huarte de Juan, excuse my Spanish, and he lived from 1529 to 1588. And it's important to know the kind of source this is. This can either be a primary or a secondary source, because technically Juan Huarte wrote it, but then it was translated into Italian, and then it was translated into English by Richard Carew. So it's a translation really of the translation, and the English translation was in 1594. This can be considered both a medical and a scientific text. And it's important in many different reasons, for many different reasons. It influences the development of Western psychology and neuroscience. Even though this text was written in the mid to late 16th century, it's going to set up the framework or paradigm of Freudian psychology and then neuroscience and neuropsychology itself into the late and early 20th centuries. This text was written for scholars, students, and the larger public all alike. And I put a photo of the cover of the book by Richard Carew. And also I put here on the right some of the ideas that spark modern psychology, ideas of psychological needs, self-esteem, love and belonging, self-actualization, which is going to be a little bit later with Abraham Maslow. But I think what's important here is if we put ourselves in the world of 16th century Europe, whether it's Spain or England, the medical and scientific fields were really, they were making advancements, but it was really stuck in superstition, where Juan Huarte really developed this idea of, hey, regardless of your backgrounds, of your social class, that there's certain gifts that God has given you, that your wit, so to speak, that you can develop into whatever field you're going to get into. So the importance of the text, as I've said previously, it's seen as the predecessor of many psychological schools of thought and influenced many natural philosophers such as Bacon and Descartes, as well as ideas about medicine. Here's a photo of Descartes right here on the top right. The ideas of family and education, looking for each individual's unique gift or talent, is proposed by Huarte. And as I said before, it was very, very common in the 15th and 16th century, and just the medieval world in general, that, hey, if you were a peasant and your father was working on the mill, that's what you would do. There wasn't this sense of, what is my calling in life? And really, this text really proposes that fathers should raise their sons to be involved to fit their natural wit. And the ideal context would be in the sciences. A boy's job or destiny should be based upon their unique abilities and gifts, not social class or birth connections, which obviously in the medieval world, very hierarchical societies, this would have been the norm. So he's the first to propose wit as a property of creativity in the mind and soul. And he's also, this is kind of debatable, but from reading the text, he talks about man's nature and also nurture. So I always wondered here, is this kind of the beginnings of the mind, not the mind, the nature versus nurture debates? And here I put the different characteristics of how we learn, the 8 different ways we learn: musical learning, our musical abilities, visual abilities, body kinesthetic abilities. So these ideas that we see later in the 19th and 20th century in psychology can find its roots back to Huarte's texts. So what's the relationship to this module? So what I found here is I think it's a big transition in the medical field in Europe from superstition to rationalization. There's medical and psychological advancements that are based on truth, not just for selfish gain or superstition. And throughout the readings, we see Pero Arras de Benavides, excuse my Spanish again, but here is a Spanish physician who really proposes that that there's unique findings in dragon's blood, which obviously we know dragons aren't real, but this was a man who abused his profession for his own selfish gain. And what we're seeing is, though there is this idea of truth and this idea of using our rationalization, using our faculties to find scientific truth in the medieval era, it's still wrapped in the superstition voodoo, so to speak. And Huarte in the 16th century is kind of getting the medical field out of that, even though there is the idea of the four humors in his text, without a doubt, of using the rational mind. The debate of Spain's scientific and technological legacy. A lot of the historiography we talked about is in this debate and conversation about Spain's technological and scientific advancements, and how, other historiography in the 16th and 17th and 18th centuries talk about Spain, just like England, bringing scientific and medical progress to the New World. But it's important to remember Huarte's work is at the height of Spanish exploration in the Spanish Empire, and other historians and modern scholars look to, the maps, for example, of many of these ancient civilizations, not ancient, but rather the indigenous civilizations, and say, hey, they had modern advanced medicine too, just from a different perspective. And what I wonder here, and kind of pondering this through the text I was reading, is since Spain was so influenced by Islam, I wonder, was Huarte's work influenced by Muslim medical knowledge, or is this really just his own findings and his own practice? So something just to kind of ponder the influence of Muslim medical knowledge on Spain during this time period. So to wrap up here, the importance to science. So we have new paradigms about men's gifts and callings based on a systematic approach. As we talked about here, this is, without a doubt, the use of the humors would have been important, but the idea that, hey, if you're gifted to teach, you can teach. If you're gifted to work with your hands, you work with your hands. That your wit is not just based on your social class, as I said before, but based on your unique abilities. There is references to older theories based on Aristotle and Plato, and it seems like at times throughout the text, he praises them and other times he critiques them. So we're seeing a reference to the old scientific models or paradigms here. God in the Bible is mentioned everywhere, which makes sense in a very Christian culture, but he gives biblical arguments for democratizing wit to both men and women, right? It would have been very popular to believe that only men had wit, but he's saying that women also have wit. And he also, he quotes the book of Ruth, and he quotes the story of Naomi, and biblical women Mary, all throughout the New Testament, to show that men and women aren't just made in God's image as equals, but also have that same wit. And the usage of man's rationality to make advancements, right? And I said this before, this is a precursor to psychology and neurology, and I think it's an important text. I think unless you're into this field, a lot of people don't really know this. And I think it's interesting to see Huarte's and Carews' impact on psychology and neurology, and history for that matter, as we advance in our psychological knowledge for the future. So that's my presentation. Thank you very much.